You're listening to the X Zone Radio Show live and around the world on the Talkstar Radio Network. Visit us online at
www.xzone-radio.com.
The X Zone radio and TV show is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Rob McConnell's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the X Zone radio and TV show or in any manner endorsed by Rob McConnell, Relmar McConnell Media Company, their advertisers, Talkstar Radio Network, or its affiliated stations and their employees.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
One 877-528-8255 is toll free. Welcome back to the X Zone, everyone. My name is Rob McConnell. We're coming to you live and around the world on the Talkstar Radio Network and our fine family of broadcast affiliates, and a growing family it is, across Canada, the United States, Central America, the Caribbean, South America, the Pacific Rim, 20 Asian countries, and across Europe. If you'd like to give us a call, our toll-free number is, as I said, 1-877-528-8255. That's toll-free throughout the U.S., Canada, Alaska, and Hawaii. Our email address, xzone@talkstarradio.com. On MSN Messenger, talkstarradio@hotmail.com. And our websites, www.xzoneradio.com and xzonetv.com. And don't forget, the X Zone archives are available at iTunes. This hour, we're going to be speaking about the Sphinx mystery, the forgotten origins of the sanctuary of Anubis. Shrouded in the mystery for centuries, the Sphinx of Giza has frustrated many people who have attempted to discover its original purpose. Accounts exist of the Sphinx as an oracle, as a king's burial chamber, and as a temple for the initiation into the Hermetic mysteries. Egyptologists have argued for decades about whether there are secret chambers underneath the Sphinx, why the head-to-body ratio is so out of proportion, and whose face adorns it. Well, tonight on our show, we have the authors of the Sphinx Mysteries, Robert and Olivia Temple. And Professor Robert Temple is the author of a dozen challenging and provocative books, commencing with the international bestseller, The Serious Mystery. His books have been translated into a total of 44 foreign languages. He combines solid academic scholarship with the ability to communicate with the mass public. He is a visiting professor of history and philosophy of science at, I know I'm going to screw this name up. I think it's Tsinghua University in Beijing, and previously held a professorship position at an American university. For many years, he was a science writer for the Sunday Times, The Guardian, and a science reporter for Time Life, as well as a frequent reviewer for Nature and profile writer for the New Scientist. Also joining us is Olivia Temple. She is an artist and a writer who has contributed to many well-known magazines in the United Kingdom. She was co-author with her husband of Aesop, The Complete Fables, which was published by Penguin Classics. She organized the Egyptian, Greek, and Italian archaeological research trips for the Project for Historical Dating, and took part in all of the archaeometric dating work in Egypt with permission of the Egyptian Supreme Council of Antiquities. And Professor Temple and Olivia, welcome to the X Zone.
Hello, Rob.
Thank you very much. Good morning, all.
Very nice to be on your show.
Well, it's
Just
great.
Imagine all those countries listening.
Yes, and congratulations on a wonderful book.
Very kind of you. I'm glad you've enjoyed it, and I hope lots of other people will.
Well, we're going to be talking about your book, The Sphinx Mystery, when we come back from this 2-minute commercial break. Robert Temple and Olivia Temple, please stand by. We will be returning in 2 minutes. Exonation, the website for this fascinating book, sphinxmystery.info. We'll continue on the other side of this 2-minute commercial break, investigating the mysteries of the Sphinx with Professor Robert Temple and Olivia Temple as the X Zone continues, live and around the world on the Talkstar Radio Network from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away. Robert and Olivia Temple are our special guests this hour. We're talking about the Sphinx Mystery. www.sphinxmystery.info is their website. And Robert, what is the Sphinx Mystery?
Well, the Sphinx Mystery is what is it and why is it, and all the questions that most people don't ask because they think they know the answers. But in fact, as our book demonstrates, unfortunately, just about everything everybody ever thought they knew about the Sphinx is wrong, and there's quite a different Sphinx out there in Giza, waiting for us to look at it with fresh eyes.
What made you write the book, and how long did it take?
Well, it took us 10 years, actually,
Wow.
to write this book. It's 576 pages long, and it has 375 pictures, and there's plenty in there.
Yes.
Almost every page has a new fact.
We love Egypt, and once you go to Egypt and you start wandering about the desert and you look at the sites, the pyramids and the temples, and the amazing stonework that the ancient Egyptians were able to do with their art and geometric mindset, you get rather hooked on it, and you end up going back, and we've been doing this for years now, and we've been very fortunate that we were able to get permission to explore, and especially to explore areas that the general public don't normally get to see. So Robert behaves a bit like a cosmic detective, and I'm his Dr. Watson.
So I've got the Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson of Egyptology with me tonight.
Well, she's an awful lot more attractive than the classic Dr. Watson, I can tell you.
And Robert's a bit of a liability to take to these places because
Why?
he's very disobedient, and he jumps into pits where you're not meant to jump, and he stays too long, and he leaps across dangerous crevices and rooftops and leaves me behind with an inspector, often a woman, who I can't really speak to because I don't speak any Arabic. And I have to stay calm, and I have to think of things to say which will distract them, like, what is that bird sitting over there? And I hope that somebody will haul him out before it gets dark and they send a search party.
The really scary bits are when I have to crawl down cobra holes and get covered in spiders and things like that.
Yeah, so not only are you the Sherlock Holmes of Egyptology, but you're also an Indiana Jones.
Yeah, he's even got the hat.
You know, I actually had a great-great-grandmother whose first name was Indiana. That's true.
Well, there you go. Wow. I have to ask you this. Whose face is on the Sphinx?
Now, are you sure you would really want us to tell you that, or shall we keep it a secret?
Oh, that's it. I won't be able to sleep now for sure.
When the early travelers went to Egypt and looked at the Sphinx way back in the 1600s and earlier, one person, a Frenchman, described it as representing a young adolescent or a woman.
But seriously, we have identified the face on the Sphinx precisely and proved it. It's all in the book, of course, but what happened was that the original head of the Sphinx was not the head of a man. It was recarved.
Oh.
And so the face that's on it now was carved in a period of Egyptian history which is known as the Middle Kingdom by the third pharaoh of that dynasty, whose name was, and wait for it, you won't be able to spell it, Amenemhet II. He was quite a good-looking guy, and he was not shy.
He does have that strange Mona Lisa look.
Yes.
A slightly enigmatic smile. Could possibly be a woman.
He may have been gay.
Ah, maybe it was Amenemhet II.
I understand.
Amenemhet II, yeah.
I understand that Cleopatra at times wore a fake beard.
Well, that was a sign of being a pharaoh, and so she had to.
Yes.
Pharaoh's life is tough.
Yeah, I guess, all those women taking care of you and...
An artificial beard in her case, I hope.
Well, they wore lots of artificial aids, like wigs. I'm not going to refer to anything else.
Yeah, okay. Well, when I looked at the Sphinx, I saw a resemblance to Queen Nefertiti.
Well, she was quite a beautiful gal.
Yes, she was.
Wouldn't have minded having her around the house. What about you, Rob?
Well, you know what? I think her Conehead would have got to me after a while, but...
That reminds me of a film called Conehead.
Dan Aykroyd.
Yes.
Yeah.
Have you been to Egypt, Rob?
Not yet, but I'll go if you ask me.
Yeah, I think you have to. You have to see it before you die.
I have heard so many wonderful things from people who have gone over there. In fact, one of our friends, Patricia Corey, takes tours over to Egypt, and so does, let me see, Mark Pinkham's wife. Her first name escapes me right now, but whatever I've heard from people who've gone to Egypt once, they get hooked on it. They can't believe the feeling of the antiquities. They feel as if Egypt brings them alive, and they feel at home.
This is a very strange thing that does happen to you, and it's really inexplicable. There is definitely some atmosphere or a hangover from ancient times in the air, like the scent of a lotus flower, and it is completely fascinating and mysterious, and the Egyptian people are so sweet and hospitable and dear, and you just feel, I do want to come back here.
Yeah.
I want to live here for a while.
I understand that during, one of the wars, that the face of the Sphinx was actually shot at by the soldiers who had nothing better to do.
Yes, used as target practice.
Oh, for God's
sake. In fact, the story that the nose was shot off by Napoleon's soldiers is actually false. It was hacked off in the 13th century by a religious fanatic called Sheikh Mohammed, who wanted to purge Egypt of non-Islamic influences. And he succeeded in getting as far as the nose. But that wasn't necessarily an accident, because traditionally for thousands of years throughout the world, it's been assumed that if you knock a nose off a statue or an effigy, that you are essentially killing it, that is, taking its magic away.
And don't forget that the Sphinx in history has repeatedly been completely covered in sand. So for many years, hundreds of years, it was only the head and a bit of neck that stuck up out of the sand, and people used to just clamber over the head or use it to throw stones at, and it was in fact thought of as very bad luck to climb up over the head. And several people did meet with unpleasant accidents soon after doing so, like being thrown off their horse.
Yes, way back in the 17th century, a Frenchman fell off the head and killed himself. You got to be careful when you get around the Sphinx and start climbing on its head.
Well, you can't do that now, of course.
It was thought to be a woman for a long time, for hundreds of years, for the simple reason that it had this strange headdress, which people had forgotten was once a sacred headdress of a pharaoh. They call it in Egyptian a nemes headdress, and it was used for sacred purposes, but it looks like something a woman would wear, and so it was assumed it must be a woman because no man would normally go around like that, so they thought.
Well, there is also that rather androgynous expression and the enigmatic smile, so it's completely understandable that one would think it was a woman, and of course it would be a goddess.
When Olivia says it reminds her of the Mona Lisa, she's got a real point, because it is this strange enigmatic quality that they share.
The rest of the body, a lot of people say it's a lion. Is it possible that it's a cat, because the Egyptians revered cats?
Well, it's true they revered cats, but what it really was, it was a dog.
A dog.
Sorry to all those cat lovers out there who would rather that it might be a cat, like their dearly beloved that's rubbing along their ankles at the moment. But the sacred dog known as Anubis was the traditional guardian of the necropolis where people were buried. And it was a gigantic statue of a crouching dog, and it's in the dog's crouching position with those long legs out front and so on. And it would have had a head in proportion, which was the dog's head. Most people are familiar with the image of a crouching dog statue that was found in the tomb of Tutankhamun. That brings to mind something very similar to what the Sphinx would have looked like originally. Now, there was a period, well, there were several periods of chaos in Egyptian history, but the first great one is what the Egyptologists call the first intermediate period, which is rather a tame name for a wild time. And after that part of Egyptian history known as the Old Kingdom collapsed in social chaos, plague, famine, floods, droughts, everything all at once, where the rule of law collapsed and there was no government anymore and everything was a total mess. Not unlike the United States in 2009.
I was going to say that, but I'm glad you did.
There was this period when mobs are known to have rampaged around the Giza Plateau, smashing everything in sight out of their rage, soon to be seen, I suppose, in Washington, not to mention Wall Street. And they mutilated things that they could get their hands on, and we know that they smashed the statues of the pharaohs and so on. And it must have been at that time that the head of the Sphinx was mutilated, which would have been easy to do with a long pointy nose and tall pointy ears.
Right.
Knock them off like that sheikh later did with the nose of the recarved head. And so it would have just been like a stump. And then about 300 years later, when this pharaoh Amenemhet II came along, and he took an interest in Giza, even though it wasn't really near the base where they were having their capital in those days, he would have said, okay, we're going to have to put a new head on this. And by the way, I'm kind of a good-looking guy. I think I'll put my face on there.
So he wasn't an egomaniac particularly, but it was sitting there waiting for something to be put on it, so he thought, why not me? I just want to mention that there used to be a lot of bright-colored paint used on the Sphinx, and many of the early travelers described it as being blood red.
The face was red and the body was yellow.
Wow. Please stand by, Robert and Olivia. We have to take a commercial break with the news. www.sphinxmystery.info. Professor Robert Temple and Olivia Temple are our special guests, and they'll return with me on the other side of the news as we continue right here on Talkstar.
My name is Michael Telstar, Canada's leading mentalist from Toronto, Ontario.
Hi, my name is Splenda, and you're listening to my dad, Ron McConnell, on the XM.
This is Psychic Dorothy from St. Catharines, and you're listening to Rob McConnell. Hello, my name is Holly Reeves, an astrologer from Astro4U, and you're listening to Canada's #1 paranormal radio show, The X Zone, with Rob McConnell.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Welcome back, everyone. Professor Robert Temple and Olivia Temple are our special guests this hour. We're talking about their new book called Sphinx Mystery. And Robert, how long did it take the original builders to complete the building of the Sphinx?
It's carved out of a solid bedrock of limestone. But as it's still today the largest stone statue in the world, it couldn't have been done just in a few weeks. So this would have been a huge effort of carving, as it's really the size of a small ocean liner. I mean, when you stand beside it and see how huge it is, you just don't know how they ever did it. It's hard to know how long it would have taken, but I would say, well, at least 2 or 3 years of full-time labor. It's really hard to imagine, because you would have had to have a team working on it, and how would they all get the template right? One false stroke, you know. On the other hand, you couldn't just have one Michelangelo doing it, because he would have had to have 10 lifetimes. How they managed to do this kind of thing, to make something so huge from a small drawing and get it in proper proportion, that is with the original head, of course, is an amazing feat. It's really hard to imagine. They did have grids whereby they were able to expand and shrink things in size, because they are known in Egypt to have used geometrical grids whereby they could take something that was small and get it to scale in a much larger size. We found a lot of those plans. So they must have had a really huge grid for something that's still the biggest statue in the world, even now in 2009.
But a lot of it was already an existing huge lump of limestone, wasn't it? So it was, because it was a plateau, there would have been this huge protuberance, and they would have used that as a basic idea and of the basis of the creature that they finally ended up with.
It is the bedrock, and everything's been carved away from around it. So it's like doing a statue in reverse.
Right. Why is it that people, or I shouldn't say people in general, but people who want to believe in the extraterrestrial connection believe that the Egyptians could not have accomplished the pyramid and the Sphinx and many of the other accomplishments that they did without the existence of ETs, when archaeologists and scientists have proven time and time again that these were a very ingenious people and that they did them themselves?
Well, how the pyramids were constructed is such an astounding subject that one could go on about that for many hours. And in fact, I actually discussed that in my next book called The Egyptian Dawn, which should be published in about a year's time, because I've made a lot of extraordinary new discoveries there. But this book is really confined to the subject of the Sphinx, except that I was able to demonstrate, and you can find this in the last 2 chapters, that the Sphinx and the 3 main Giza pyramids are a unified design concept, that they were all designed and planned at the same time for whatever reason, because you'll find in the book something called the Golden Giza Plan, which is based upon an Egyptian geodetic survey map of the plateau, so it's all perfectly accurate, upon which I have superimposed in gold rays various lines connecting key points, none of which had ever been discovered before, which show, in fact conclusively demonstrate, that these four monuments are all linked by a recurring angle known as the golden angle, and rays, as I call them, shooting out from key points like midpoints, the apex of a pyramid, or the midpoint of the base of a side, to the middle and extremities of the Sphinx, for instance. And this is the same identical angle that repeats over and over and over and over again in a kind of crazy way on the Giza Plateau, and forms the secret design pattern linking the four monuments.
Maybe you could only see it from above. In fact, it is something you have to visualize from above, which would encourage people to think that it must have been an extraterrestrial design, because it only really makes sense if you can see it from an aerial perspective.
Well, it's really very extraordinary that you can only detect it if you have a geodetic survey map.
Sorry about that. There's a buzzer gone off in our apartment.
Geodetic survey map is something that we can only have in modern times. If you try and find this pattern on the inadequate survey maps prepared by the archaeologists at ground level, you can't discover it. So we don't really know how on earth ancient Egyptians were able to get that degree of accuracy.
They're very accurate in everything that they've done, including the pyramids. And like when you look at the engineering behind the pyramid in that period of time, it certainly does raise a lot of mysteries. But once again, I believe in in forbidden archaeology and forgotten archaeology. So anything is possible.
Well, the Sphinx mystery is full of forgotten archaeology, and one of the key things that we were able to discover is the conclusive proof of the existence of a chamber, a burial chamber beneath the Sphinx. And I was able to discover all this mostly in the British Library, although also from some other libraries.
Right.
281 years worth of published reports by many people in different languages of eyewitness accounts of people who actually entered this chamber, which was reached by a vertical shaft that was intruded from the top of the Sphinx's back at the haunch region. And this was a burial chamber because although it had been reached in antiquity, they found remains of a coffin smelling of resin. And the interesting fact is that the chamber's walls were covered in hieroglyphics. So if we could get back in there, we could read the hieroglyphics and find out who was buried there, presumably.
Right.
But in 1926, this was all sealed in cement by this manic French character called Émile Barrès, who was a great tidier-up. He wasn't really an archaeologist. He did a lot of excavation work on the Sphinx, and he was intent upon making it fit for tourism, as they still are today out there. Everything's got to look good because we're going to have some tourists coming. And so the Sphinx is very seriously Botoxed and had countless jobs, not to mention the wrong kind of nose job. And it's been tarted up to such an extent that it's a kind of parody of itself, and it's on the verge of becoming a Disneyland artifact. But if you go into the forgotten archaeology of the Sphinx, as you were just referring to it, then you discover what's really going on. And we've now got the conclusive proof of this mysterious chamber that many books have been written about, speculating, does it exist? But in fact, I found the proof that it exists. 281 years of published reports of people who actually entered this chamber and wrote it up in their books. And all of that material is in our book because every description of the Sphinx from the time of the Romans, a man called Pliny, up until 1837, are all in the back of the book. Olivia translated all the French ones, and I translated the German ones, And it's all there, and you don't have to go to your library anymore. Just buy the book, and you've got the whole lot.
It's very fascinating from one aspect, well, from many, but one of the things that struck me when I was looking at these French travelers' tales is how long it took them to get from Cairo to the Sphinx. Nowadays, you can see that the edge of Cairo is creeping nearer and nearer. There's hardly any space of desert left between the Giza Plateau and the town of the city. But it used to take many hours on horseback.
In fact, if you went by boat, it took 3 hours just to get to the village, and then you had to ride an ass, and then you had to get off the ass and use your feet to climb up the plateau. So this was a huge trip, and you could just about squeeze it into one day if you started at 5 in the morning, but it was normal to take 2 days to make this trip to the Giza Plateau from Cairo in the old days.
Speaking of water, Robert, why don't you tell Rob something about the water theory?
Well, if you go to Egypt and you see the Sphinx, one of the first things that strikes you is that here you have the largest statue in the world, and it's sitting in a hole in the ground. And why isn't it on top of something showing off? Why do you have to sort of peer down into this pit to look at this giant thing? What's going on? And a lot of people have called attention in recent years to the fact that there seems to be signs of water erosion in this pit and on the Sphinx itself. And so we've figured this one out. It's not what has come to be known as the ancient rain theory, and the Sphinx isn't of monumental antiquity going back 12,500 years, as many people say, when we don't even really know that there was actually rain there anyway. What was really going on is that before the Aswan Dam existed, the Nile, at the inundation period for 3 months of the year, reached right up to the doors of the Sphinx Temple, which is in front of the Sphinx. And so I have put together the entire process by which water was let in through a channel into this pit, which was in fact a moat. And
oh my gosh.
It was sealed off in the channel by sluice gates and water gates, and I've photographed all the bolt holes and counterweight places and so on in the stone to show and demonstrate that all these gates were there to control the water flow. So this was a moat, and you had this giant statue of Anubis in the Old Kingdom period sitting surrounded by water. And it was known as Jackal Lake, which is mentioned many times in the ancient pyramid texts. Because, you know, if you ask an Egyptologist, is there any evidence of the Sphinx in the ancient text, they'll say, well, no, it's never mentioned. Now, how can you have the largest statue in the world never mentioned? That's crazy. But it's because they're looking for a lion with a man's head, and it was neither a lion nor did it have a man's head. It was an Anubis. And if you look at the most ancient texts, and I've quoted them all in the book at great length, you find that they specifically describe that there's a giant Anubis, the guardian of Giza. It sits beside a causeway, and it's surrounded by this lake, which is known as Jackal Lake, where sacred ceremonies took place. And every time the pharaoh died, his internal organs were removed before his mummification took place and put into 4 jars. And the pyramid texts even describe his son, the new pharaoh, going down to Jackal Lake and submerging these jars in the water and washing his father's weary heart, his father's organs in these jars in a sacred rite that preceded his mummification and later burial. And this was all going on, and then the pharaoh would get into a little boat, and he'd make a circuit round Anubis, which was also known as the Winding Waterway. And we've put together this entire lost story of what really took place at the Sphinx, what it really was, what its true purpose was, why it was there, and all these forgotten things.
So it was entering, the main point was that you would enter the netherworld, and the gate to the netherworld was under the care of Anubis. So it was the most sacred place in the world.
That is truly fascinating. That is truly fascinating. There was so much pomp and circumstance in everything that they did in Egypt, and you know, to look back in time through a time portal to what Egypt was, and to look at Egypt today, you have to say, what happened?
Yeah, that's a good question, Rob.
Yeah.
Doctor,
Doctor,
the beginning, in schools now in Egypt, they are teaching the kids about ancient Egyptian life. Excuse me. And you see groups of children doing drawings in the museums and looking in wonder at the Sphinx and at the pyramids, and they are very much enthralled by it themselves. But many cultures have collapsed, and we wonder, when we go to many other countries, what happened? What happened?
Well, everybody should strongly support the existing Egyptian government, I can tell you, because if the wrong people ever came to power in Egypt, there wouldn't be any tourism or archaeology anymore.
really?
You get my drift.
I certainly do.
Nothing was left to chance in the designs, though. The whole place is like a puzzle, and you can't help but try to fit the pieces into each other. And there's a great cosmic order and a great plan behind it all, and you know it's there, but you can't quite figure out what was it really all about.
Professor and Olivia, please stand by. We have to take our final break. Professor Robert Temple and Olivia Temple are very special guests. Their website, sphinxmystery.info. We'll be back on the other side of this commercial break as the X-Zone continues live and around the world from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada on Talkstar. Welcome back, everyone. I'd like to take this opportunity of thanking all our guests tonight. Rhonda Pallas Downey was with us in our first hour. We talked about living flower essences. Hour number 2, Angela Donovan, who is a spiritual mentor and medium, was with us. Jane Doherty, the author of Awakening the Mystic Gift, in hour number 3. And our very special guests this hour, Professor Robert Temple and Olivia Temple, talking about their new book entitled Sphinx Mystery. First of all, to both of you, thank you very much for joining us this morning here on the X-Zone. It certainly has been a great pleasure, a lot of super information. But, Olivia, I have a question for you. How do you get on working together as a married couple?
Well, I often wonder how we've done it for so long. It's good fun. It's a challenge, and it's never dull. Between us, we have qualities that the other one lacks, so we manage very well on the whole. Sometimes I get embarrassed, sometimes I get angry that Robert is such a wild card, but I can tell you it's great fun, and this book has been a real adventure.
Robert, how do you...
Olivia is incredibly visually observant, and when we've been working on some of the Egyptian monuments, she spots things that I don't see, because among her many activities and talents, she's a very fine painter and highly visual, and whereas I'm often so busy thinking I don't notice things. And I tend to be more book-oriented, but she's very observant. For instance, she always notices what everybody's wearing, which I don't see, She'll say something afterwards like, "Did you see that man's shoes?" And I would say something like, "Shoes? I don't ever look at shoes."
You only just remember to pack your shoes. Robert takes a suitcase full of books. I take the clothes, the hats, the change of underwear.
Oh, gosh.
And so you could say I'm his manager and his editor. And
my nanny.
You also
and
sound...
his nanny, he is an exceptional person. He's got a brain that's far too big for his body, a bit like the Sphinx, the other way around. And we just... One day I have to write the story of our life together.
Well, it also sounds like you're his best friend in the whole world.
I hope so. I just wanted to mention, you said, you're talking about flower scents
Yes.
and essences. The blue lotus, which is like a wonderful sort of mauvey blue water lily,
Yes.
was a symbolic flower the scent of which bestowed immortal life.
Isn't that
in ancient Egypt.
That's wonderful.
And it's depicted in the carvings of all the kings and queens and gods and everyone. They breathe in this scent of the blue lotus, and they live forever. So we ought to be looking for some of those.
I think we should.
You often see them holding the flower with the petals separated like an oxygen mask over their faces. So,
Professor and Mrs. Olivia Temple, we have to say so long for now, but I do thank you so much for this wonderful hour and for sharing so much with us, and thank you for finally solving the mystery of the Sphinx.
Thank you, Rob. It's been a pleasure.
Good night.
Wonderful to be on your show, Rob.
Well, I hope to have you back on again, Professor, and take care of yourself, and happy travels to both of you.
Thank you.
Good night now. Bye-bye. Wow, great hour. Their website is sphinxmystery.info. Melanie at Master Control, super night, dear. Thanks for keeping us up on those 4 big satellites in the sky, Galaxy 4R, Telstar 7, Aglia 2, and on G3, and of course on TalkStarRadio.com, streaming audio. Rob at X-Zone TV, thank you. Stephanie at production, thank you. And to you, the X-Zone Nation, thank you for allowing us to be part of your day or night, no matter where you are. So until tomorrow night at 10 o'clock, take care of each other and keep your eyes to the sky and your heart